when I woke up, very confused. She said, "You almost died last night. In fact, no one can believe you were alive."
I went into the games not knowing what was coming.
As humans, we just hate uncertainty.
You just sensed that it was out there.
You have to start somewhere.
We're all programmed to push ourselves even farther.
This is On the X, an IRONCLAD original. Welcome to On the X. Today's episode is a little different. As we kick off season 2, we're introducing a new format. Alongside our interviews, we'll be sharing focused episodes built around a single question or theme, featuring highlights from some of our most compelling guests. To start, we're asking, what are the most important traits that make a great leader? You'll hear from Sinek, whose work, including the best-selling book Start With Why, has reshaped how organizations think about leadership, trust, and purpose. Then Jocko Willink, retired Navy SEAL and co-author of Extreme Ownership, provides his combat-tested perspective. Next, Jason Jaggard, executive coach, founder of Novus Global, and author of Beyond High Performance, shares insight from his work with elite performers across business and sports. And finally, Brian Gottlieb, author of Beyond the Hammer and an entrepreneur who built one of the top home improvement companies in America, gives us his take. I hope you enjoy what they have to say. So here we go first with Sinek and what makes a great leader on the X. If you're trying to hire somebody, a leader, are there specific characteristics that you should be looking for, where it's like these 2 things, these 3 things are the most important thing that I should look for?
So I charisma and vision, I know some great leaders that don't have big Steve Jobs visions, and I also know some great leaders who you find out that they're the leader, like that's the leader, like you wouldn't describe them as charismatic. Right. And not by a traditional definition anyway. I think for me, there's 2 things and they're kind of inextricably linked. So they kind of go together. I think for me, the number one thing that I look for is courage, right? Which is leadership sucks. Leadership is hard. And the courage to do the right thing, the courage to take a short-term loss, the courage to put people ahead of profits, the courage to speak truth to power, the courage to be honest about yourself and your own failings. I think those things are all unbelievably difficult things to do and make for great leaders. And, inextricably linked to that is integrity. That when somebody has integrity and the courage to follow that integrity, man, great things happen because great people will surround that person and they will make sure that great things happen. So I'd love to hear your opinion based on your experiences in the field, but I think courage and integrity rank high.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think what I worry about these days a little bit is it feels almost like the incentives out there are not in alignment with those things.
You have just articulated the problem with American business today.
Yeah, I think so.
This is what Jack Welch broke when he reinvented capitalism. And the capitalism we have today is not the capitalism that made America great. This is not Adam Smith capitalism. This is some bastardized, twisted Milton Friedman, Jack Welch bullshit capitalism that enriches the few at the cost of the many. And that's not what capitalism is supposed to be. That's not what it ever was designed to do, where we put a shareholder ahead of a customer. That's not what capitalism is. That never was. We live in a world now, like you would never buy a new car just so that you can buy gas, right? You buy a car so that you can go somewhere and you need the gas to get there. Well, a company is a car, and we don't start companies just to make money. We start companies to go somewhere, to do something, to contribute to something, and we need the money to make the company go, right? And no one's going to get into your car and they'll be like, great, how much gas are we buying? They're going to get in your car and be like, where are we going? And that's where you need that visionary who sits in the front seat looking out the window going, I'm looking a million miles ahead and this is where we're going to go. And I think we now live in a world in which we literally buy cars just to buy gas, which is completely screwed up. And then we incentivize people going, listen, if you help us get a lot of gas, I will give you more gas than you've ever dreamed of having. And you're absolutely right. The whole incentive structure is completely screwed up. When we started incentivizing senior leaders, not based on the performance of the company, but based on the performance of the equity, you knew things were going to start going sideways.
Right.
Do you know when companies announce they make a significant investment in R&D, the stock price goes down. When they make an announcement that they're making mass layoffs, the stock price goes up. That is screwed up. And that is the world we live in today.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're 100% right. All of the complaining we have about capitalism, business, the 1%, go down the list of every complaint that the left has and every complaint that the right has. We fix the incentive structures, we're good.
Yeah. So how do we do that? Like, what's the way out of that though? Because to your point, the system is so incentivized the other way at this point.
Well, it took us 40 years to get here. It's going to take us 20 or 30 years to get out of it. But I think part of it is a younger generation. I think the younger generation, remember, you and I are of an age where when I talk about the gold watch, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
Right? I've done this on the stage where I'll talk about the gold watch and I'll make a joke. I'm like, raise your hand if you have no idea what I'm talking about. Like there's an entire generation that when we talk about the gold watch, they do not know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right? The concept of working your entire career for one company and then being given a gold watch out of gratitude at the end of your tenure does not exist. And I don't blame I don't blame employees. Companies set the rules, employees play by the rules, right? So it used to be that company gave you care and loyalty and employee gave back care and loyalty. That was the deal. But then companies started not. They started saying, well, look, we've missed our projections. We're going to be profitable, just not as profitable as we promised Wall Street. So I'm sorry, you lose your job. Oh, and by the way, it's not a meritocracy because you've been doing great work and you've been working here for 20 years, but nothing personal, it's just business, right? Which is such a crock of shit. And those are the rules that became completely normalized. Mass layoffs did not exist in the United States prior to the 1980s. It didn't exist. It's a relatively new construction. It is not part of capitalism. It is a new construction. It was normalized by people like Jack Welch. And it became completely normalized in the 90s and 2000s, where CEOs now go on television and make these announcements without any shame. You should be embarrassed that that's your strategy, right? But those were the rules that the company set, that we no longer give you loyalty, though we demand it back. And at some point, employees started going, no. And you have a young generation that has grown up watching their parents get laid off through no fault of their own. They went to work thinking everything was fine and then came home because the company, quote unquote, missed its projections. And so young kids who are now in the labor pool are going, that deal doesn't work for me. And so what we accuse them of, entitlement and all of this stuff, quite frankly, I think is just a Newtonian reaction. For every action, there's an equal opposite reaction. And if you give it enough time, there's going to be a consequence for the way that you run a business. And I think those consequences are showing up now. So there's a young generation that looks at that form of capitalism and the management that's existed and goes, that doesn't work for me. And my hope is that they're listening to podcasts like this one and saying, you know what, I'm going to lead differently. I'm not going to lead like my dad or my mom. I'm going to lead not like the previous generations, no matter what they taught in business school. Even that stuff they're teaching business schools backwards. I'm going to lead in a different way where I'm going to prioritize the care of people and then watch what happens. And I am going to take longer viewpoints on the success of my company. I don't really care about the quarter. I may not even care about the year. I just care about the trajectory and the trend of how I'm doing. Like when I go on a long drive, I don't actually care if I drove 100 miles a day or 150 miles, but I do care that I get to where I'm going in a reasonable period of time, even if it's not the exact time that I expected. And I'm very bullish that this young generation will start to undo some of the damages of the boomer generation.
Yeah, it certainly does seem like the younger generation, whatever that is, right? I mean, we talk about millennials and Gen Z and
I count Gen X.
Okay, I'm Gen X.
I'm Gen X as well.
Yeah, you and I are about the same age.
And I want to completely undo everything that the boomers did, to the business world. So I think, X, Y, and Z need to band together and say, let's do this.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly does seem like they care way more about, I don't know about purpose, but like, I'm trying to find the right word for it, but like a cause, a vision, that kind of thing, right?
Purpose as well.
Yeah.
Look, I could not have the career that I have right now in the 1980s. Like if I talked about purpose at work, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I would have been like laughed at. In fact, when I started 15 years ago talking about purpose at work, it didn't exist. I had to change the words to make people listen to me. I couldn't talk about vision and mission and purpose. I talked about the why.
Right.
Because otherwise no one would purpose at work. Are you kidding? Purpose is for like church and for hippies, right? And so I changed the terminology so that the people who I needed to listen would listen. I wasn't just preaching to the converted. Now, every freaking company has a purpose statement on their website. Now, whether they follow it or not or believe it or not, is a different conversation. But the fact that they all have one means that there's enough social pressure to have one that at least it's moving in the right direction, which is the opposite of what Jack Welch was doing.
On the X is brought to you by Mechanix Wear. Mechanix Wear gloves are kind of the go-to glove, I think, for most people out there, whether it's working around the house or on the job or some kind of tactical setting. That's certainly been the case for me throughout my life. And they've made a whole bunch of improvements to the gloves that they have out there. So they've got the kind of original series here with the Velcro backing, Velcro close that most people can use in sort of everyday settings, very ubiquitous for various things that you might want to do. Then they've got these fast fit ones, which you essentially just slide on. There's a little loop there around the wrist where you can pull them on. And then they've got the Impact series, which has a reinforced backing to protect your knuckles. And then they've got this lock ring reinforcement around the thumb now, where there's a lot of wear and tear. There's a whole bunch of other improvements to these. And if you go to their website, they literally have a 5 to 7 minute video about each one of these sets of gloves and all the improvements they've made, from the material, reducing the seams, making them more reinforced, making them more moisture wicking. It's clear that they put a lot of care and attention into their gloves. And if you listen to the guy talk on the website, they really love gloves. And I think that that comes out in everything they do. When I'm going out to a hardware store and I'm looking for some gloves, I almost look at everything else as just kind of a cheap knockoff. So definitely my go-to glove, highly recommended. Mechanix Wear gloves, they're available at most retailers on mechanixwear.com and GSA Advantage, and they're proud to offer an exclusive 15% off discount through the ID.me program to military veterans and first responders. So check them out. And next, here's Jocko Willink.
When people ask me about the characteristic that I think is most important for leadership, it's a real simple answer for me to give. For me, it's humility. So, and the reason that I give that answer is because when I was running TradeEt for the last few years, I was in the SEAL teams. When we would fire a SEAL leader, when we would fire someone from a platoon commander or a platoon chief from a leadership position, we would be firing that SEAL leader not because they didn't know how to shoot their weapon, not because they weren't in good physical condition, not because they didn't understand strategy. Those guys would get fired from those leadership positions because they lacked humility. Because when they lack humility, they don't listen to anyone else. They try and impose their plan on everyone. They don't take any input, and they don't take any feedback. They don't take any criticism. And so it's just terrible. And not to mention when someone like that gets overseas, now they don't respect the enemy because they don't think the enemy is as good as they are. And now they get complacent. So it's just problematic. So that's always the thing that I talk about when it comes to the most important characteristic of a leader is humility.
Yeah, I'm completely in agreement with you on this, and I wanted to bring this up later, but let's talk about it now. And we'll get into this too, but your kids stuff, like your kids books here, which I read through, and this first one, there's a portion of it where you're sort of bringing up the different codes from Viking code and like knighthood and the Ranger Creed and right, all of that kind of stuff. And what's interesting about them is not all of them have that in there. In fact, it's only really like when I looked at it, like the SEAL ethos. And then when this kid comes up with his own code, right at the end, it's got in there, be humble. And I think that that's so critical. And I'm curious why, just your thoughts on that too. Like why you think it isn't in some of those, not to say that they're wrong, but why that's not in there. And again, getting back to kind of the previous question here, do you feel like we're sort of going in the wrong direction in that regard with leaders these days? Because I see that a lot, I think, in the public landscape, like it's being disincentivized to act that way. It's almost incentivized to not have integrity and not have courage and almost, to your point, blame everybody else. Do you think that's true?
I don't know if I necessarily see that. I know that people will tag me in social media when a leader either takes ownership or doesn't take ownership. And, they'll tag me and say, this is extreme ownership. Great job, this individual. Maybe it's a sports team coach or it's a leader of some kind of business. And so I'll see people will mention when that happens, and then they'll mention when someone doesn't take ownership and blames other people, they'll kind of mention that as well. So I see a little bit of both, but I don't think it's any kind of, I think that's probably been like that for a long time, that people's natural instincts. And, a lot of what we teach is to counter the natural human instincts that we have. In fact, just about everything that we teach is to counter the natural instincts that most people have. And, for instance, cover and move. Why do we need to teach cover and move? Well, it's because our natural instinct is to look out for ourselves and not take care of the rest of the team. Why do we have to teach simple? Well, it's because people have a tendency to make things too complicated. Why do we have to teach prioritize and execute? Well, it's because people have a tendency to try to do too many things at the same time or to focus on the wrong things. Why do we have to teach decentralized command? Well, it's because most people want to control everything and make every decision. And why do we have to teach extreme ownership? Well, it's because most people want to blame other people. It's their natural instinct. When you walk into the kitchen and your 5-year-old kid is sitting there at the table and there's milk spilled and you ask him what happened, he points in the milk and says the milk spilled. He didn't do it. That's a natural instinct, is to blame the milk, an inanimate object. So I think that these different types of leaders, good leaders and bad leaders, have been around for a long time. And I think that maybe they get highlighted more or less in certain time periods, but I think I think there's lots of incentive to take ownership, and I see it a lot with a lot of leaders right now.
Yeah. Is there anything you do when you go in with companies that's focused on the team itself too? I sort of asked this question to Simon as well. Like, do we sometimes put too much emphasis just on the leader and not on the group?
Well, I think the key component for me is one of the things when we talk about decentralized command, we talk about everyone as a leader. Literally everyone is a leader. And you know this from being in a SEAL platoon. In a SEAL platoon, in a good SEAL platoon, everyone's a leader. And every fire team leader is going to step up and make things happen. And a new guy that's in his first platoon, he's going to step up and lead in his little part of the mission and make things happen. And that's what we should want. And so, yeah, for me, everyone is a leader. So therefore, everyone needs to learn the leadership skills and the leadership principles.
Yeah. Do you ever talk about, I'm sure you do, but I'm curious what it looks like for you, like leading up, right? Because I think so often we think about leading down, where it's like, I'm in charge of people and therefore I am the leader and I'm leading them. But there's not as much talk about how you lead up the chain of command. So how do you approach that with companies?
Yeah, we actually have a chapter in the book that's called Leading Up the Chain of Command.
Yeah.
Specifically what we talk about. And that's, again, this, you're in the military. I and you as leaders of a SEAL platoon also had to lead our commanding officer in the right direction. We had to lead our Commodore. We had to lead our task group commander. We had to lead a battalion commander. And again, it's leadership. So you're interacting, I say all the time, if you have to interact with other human beings, or when you interact with other human beings, it's leadership. And I'd say this as well. The way that I lead up the chain of command is the same way that I lead across the chain of command and down the chain of command. So if I build a relationship with people, whether they're the lowest person in the platoon or they're the senior SOTIF commander, I am going to treat them all the same. I'm going to listen to what they have to say. I'm going to try and implement what they're talking about into the plan. I'm going to treat them with respect. I'm going to make sure they know I care about them. And that's what I'm going to do, up, down, and across the chain of command. So I think, leading up the chain of command is a critical part that doesn't get talked about very often. That's one of the reasons why we wrote about it.
Now let's hear from Jason Jaggard. When you think of what makes great leaders, what are those qualities? And I will say, you mentioned Simon Sinek at the beginning. When I asked him that question, his response is integrity and courage. Those are the two things he says. And he's talking, I think, sort of traditional, how you think of integrity. When I talked to Jocko, he was big on humility. I like all three of those things. I think those are all important qualities. So I want to get your take because of that quote that was in the book, like people follow courage, what that means for you. And then also you talk about integrity, but you talk about it in maybe not the way that people would normally think of it, as just, doing the right thing and having honor and not lying. And so those kind of dig into those concepts a little bit, but then, do you have a specific set of qualities that you think make the best leaders?
Yeah, I mean, so what makes a great leader is always a funny question, because you can answer that with either great just based on magnitude of influence.
Yes.
Right. So like Genghis Khan then was like, quote, a great leader, even though he was like a horrible person. Or so I think I probably agree with Jocko, and I know I agree with Simon Sinek in terms of coming from a moral framework. Yep. And so, so like I would say a great leader is proportionate to their appetite for nobility. And you can use different words there, like virtue might be a good word. That's what the Stoics used. The ancient Hebrew tradition, they call it righteousness. Yep. But I would say a person's ability to lead is directly correlated to their appetite for excavating nobility from themselves and excavating nobility from others. So what do you mean by that? Talk about nobility then, because I think that's a great word, but I think it's potentially something we sort of know what it means. Like we feel like we know what it means, but if we're really asked, what does that mean? I think people would have a tough time articulating it potentially. Yeah. Well, and all words are made up. So how do I define it? That's true. Yeah. That's one of my favorite quotes. That's in one of the Marvel Guardians of the Galaxy. Yes. Where he says, that's just a made up word. All words are made up. And I'm like, yep, touche. Good point. That's right. Yeah. Or Thor says it to the raccoon or whatever. Yeah. That's right. All words are made up. So the way that we relate to that at the firm, this is actually, it's funny. Just yesterday, I was talking to our COO and we were deciding on what book number 3 was going to be about. And cause we're going to start writing that this year. And, this is it. Like this has been cooking, for me. So when I was nobility, the concept of nobility. That's right. Oh, cool. Yeah. Okay. This is book number 3 and very excited about it. And it's the book I wanted to write 10 years ago after Spark came out and the publisher said you were too young. And they were probably right. I mean, right or wrong or whatever. I'm glad I didn't write it back then. And now it's been 12, 13 years. And I just finished reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and he started writing that when he is in his 40s. And had you never read that before, Meditations? I never read it. No way. Really? Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Probably not recording, but I have an amazing story to tell you about that, which is fascinating. Stoicism is a fascinating thing. So but with nobility, we break it down into 4 parts, and one of them is prosperity. And we do, when we're talking about nobility, we do mean that partially financially, like your capacity to add value, your capacity to create wealth, your capacity to find out what you have and what people value, and then marry those two things is very, very, very important. And then the second piece is not just prosperity, but doing it in a way that's life-giving, doing it in a way, what we call creativity, like doing it in a way that's unique to you. So it's the intersection of prosperity, creativity, and then the third piece, there's 4 pieces. The third piece is not just doing it in a way that is about you only, but about community. So doing it in the context of community, that's the third piece. And then if you're seeking prosperity in a way that's unique to you and to the people you're doing it with, and you're doing it in the context of community, the last piece is generosity, and doing it in a way that gives back, brings back, that leaves the world better than you found it. And so then those 4 pillars, then what we would say is the object of the game is to, like Spinal Tap, dial each of those up to 11. And to close it out, here's Brian Gottlieb.
Well, I think authenticity is a really important leadership quality, because leaders come in all shapes and sizes, but authenticity wins. People want to know that they're dealing with the real person. I also think that, and it's in the book, that the leaders have to be aware of the echo of their voice, because what happens is people inside of the business are going to decide what kind of day they have based on the kind of the day that the leader is having. And in that regard, I don't think leaders get to have bad days. I don't think they get to wear their stress on their sleeve because the rest of the team is going to be stressful also. So I think, when our EQ is high and we're in tune to our actions, that's an important trait for leadership. If I'm on this podcast with you, all of a sudden I pick up my phone and I say, hold on a second, I got a text, I got to respond to this. You'd be like, Brian, what the frick are you doing here, man? We're kind of having a conversation. And yet we do that in meetings with people all the time.
Yeah.
I think staying present, being present is a really important aspect of leadership, that whether it's a one-on-one conversation or a group setting, being present for people is hugely important.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's kind of what's nice about podcasting, actually, is like I guess you could be a dick like that and just pick up your phone and start texting or whatever. But for the most part, like, you're forced to be present. It's actually, what? I never thought about it in this regard, but it's one thing that's really nice about this format is like, there's just no way to have, without being unprofessional, a distraction here. It is a conversation where there's nothing else going on. No one is texting you. No one's pinging you. No one else is in the room that's trying to grab your attention or anything. Yeah.
And you and I could be having this exact same conversation sitting in your office, right across the table from each other. And there's a chance that one of us might pick up our phone and have to shoot a message to somebody. And yet there's certain environments that we wouldn't consider doing it. If we're on stage speaking at a conference, we're not going to pick up our phone and answer a text. Right. But if we applied that to all areas when dealing with people, how much different would not only just our lives be, but the people that we interact with be? I think of it. It's actually a principle that we had, that if you imagine that every person you meet has a sticker on their forehead that reads, "Help me feel special." And if we can interact with everybody and help them feel special in that moment, that is, as much as all those other ideas of leadership, that too is leadership.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I'm going to have to think about that. Like, try that with people. Like, that's sort of like the imagine people in their underwear thing to make you feel more comfortable when you're giving a talk. Imagine them with a sticker on their forehead that says, "Make me feel special."
Well, it's interesting. Like, if you go to a Subway, right? You'll go and get a sandwich at a Subway and they make your sandwich. You can say thank you and walk out the door, or you can just take an extra second and say, "Thank you. You know what? You're clearly an artist in making sandwiches. And I just want to let you know you've made my day. I'm truly going to enjoy this. Thank you."
Yeah.
And that little extra conversation is like, "Oh my gosh, you're welcome. That's so cool." It just, these little moments of helping people feel special.
That's a good idea. I like this. I'm going to try that. Thanks for listening to On the X, the official podcast of the Navy SEAL Foundation and an IRONCLAD original series sponsored by Mechanix. Learn more at NavySealFoundation.org or text On the X to 60104. See you next time.